City Council meeting being held on August 17th, 2021 at 7 p.m. at City Hall. We welcome all those that are joining with us tonight. Let's start by just going to my far left and having the council people give their roll call.
Meekum present.
McEwen present.
Ince present.
Fillmore present.
Ivy present.
So we have all 5 council members present, so we can proceed. We will start with a prayer by myself. Our Father in heaven, we're very grateful for this opportunity that we have to gather as residents of Centerville City and other visitors. We're grateful for the responsibility that we have to be able to govern and make wise decisions regarding the city of Centerville and its residents. Help us this evening that we may be able to have a good discussion, that we may be able to listen and to hear and understand. And we're grateful, Father, for this country we live in, this state we live in, this city we live in, for all the good that is done each and every day, and for the opportunities that we have by having the freedoms that we do have. Bless those in our city that may be feeling sick or ill, that they may be able to have thy blessings with them, and bless those that protect our freedoms each and every day, that they may be able to be safe as they go in harm's way. These blessings we ask for and do so in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
We all rise and we'll repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's City Council meeting just has one item of business because it is a public hearing of truth in taxation public hearing, and so it is the opportunity for all of us to be able to voice our opinions on the truth in taxation tax increase and the fiscal year 2022 final budget. We do have a short presentation by staff explaining this truth in taxation, and so I believe that is going to be Nate that presents that. So Nate, do you want to step forward? Nate is our finance director for the city.
Get this to work. All right, thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. So like Mayor said, the 2 items here before you are the matter of truth in taxation and setting the property tax rate, as well as the fiscal year 22 budget. So first, what I'd like to do is go over the truth in taxation process. And I'll apologize in advance if this gets a little lengthy, but I know there's property taxes in Utah can be a little bit confusing if you haven't dealt with them a lot. So I wanted there to be a little bit of an education piece so that we can all be on the same page and know how property taxes work in Utah. So just as a background, back in June, the council decided to pursue a property tax increase of 14.59%. The city hasn't realized a property tax increase since 2017, and the last increase before that was in 1992. A few members of the council stated that they would like to propose a smaller increase now to keep up with inflation so they can avoid a larger future increase or a reduction in quality and services. All right, so here is a example of what a Centerville resident will see on their Davis County tax bill. This shows all the different taxing entities in the county. You can see that the school district is the largest taxing entity. They make up about 63% of your tax bill. But the important thing that I wanted to note right here is that the amount we're discussing when we talk about an increase of 14.5% is just this portion of Centerville. This is the only portion that here as a city that we can control. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, property taxes in Utah can be a little bit confusing, so I kind of want to walk through this process Property tax rates are based on the actual amount of tax dollars collected the prior year. So the rates can fluctuate from year to year. The state law limits the city to receiving the same dollar amount as it received the prior year. So again, the amount of revenue that the city sees in property taxes stays the same, but the rate can fluctuate based on home values. The exception to the city receiving the same dollar amount every year, the only way that we can receive more is if the city experiences new growth. So this is like an example of a farm or an open piece of land getting developed or being subdivided. This would be considered new growth. And the only other way that we can get more in property tax dollars is if the council enacts the truth in taxation process, which is why we're here tonight. All right, so each year, Davis County performs an assessment and assigns a value to each property. This value is called the fair market value. In Centerville, the average home's fair market value is $414,000. The taxable value is simply the value at which your property is taxed. If your property is your primary residence, then state law allows a 45% discount. So if, for example, if you lived in the average home of $414,000, the amount of taxes, if you live in that home and it's your primary residence, the state gives you a discount, and they give you a discount of 45%, so that's all you have to pay. And the big thing we need to know about how property taxes work is that as property values go up, the certified tax rate goes down. And you'll hear me repeat that a few times tonight. So I like this example of the teeter-totter. The triangle, the base at the bottom, represents the city's property tax revenue. Just like a teeter-totter, it's set in the ground and it doesn't move. Now what does move are the property values. They can fluctuate up or down. So remember, as the city's property value goes up, then the city's tax rate will go down. And vice versa, if property values drop, then the city's tax rate will go up. And we'll see how this works here in a minute. So if you wanted to calculate the tax that you owe on your tax bill, the simple equation is taking your property's taxable value, multiplying it by the taxing entity's tax rate, and this will give you the dollar amount that you owe on your property taxes. So here we have an example of a city, so we can see how this works. So here we have a city with a total taxable value of $1.2 million. And we get this by adding up all the taxable values of the home. Or we get this by adding all the taxable values of all the homes in the city. Now the city has decided that in order to operate, they need $1,500 a year in property taxes. Remember, this amount doesn't change year over year. So to get the city's property tax rate, you take the $1,500 that the city is collecting, divide it by the total taxable value, and that gives you a tax rate of 0.00125. Now, what happens when our home values increase? That's what we're saying right now. Do the total tax dollars go up when the value goes up? So here we have the same city, but as you can see, the home values have gone up, so now the city's taxable value is at $1.65 million, so it's gone up $450,000. The city still collects its same $1,500, and so you do the same formula. You take the $1,500 of taxes collected, divide it by the total taxable value, and you can see that our rate has gone down to 0.00091. So again, as values go up, the rate goes down, but the total taxes that the city collects stays the same. And we can see how this has worked in Centerville over the past 25 years. So here, this is Centerville's tax rate history. I'm going to try to use this laser to help us demonstrate. So you can see that I should add that the furthest back that I can see is 1997. So that's why we chose that at the start of our graph. We can see that from the late 90s to about the mid 2000s, the property values didn't fluctuate that much. And we know this because the values or the tax rates remained steady. Because remember, when values increase, the tax rate will decrease. So we see this happening from about 2005 to 2008. If you remember, property values, home values skyrocketed. So we see this sharp curve because home values went up drastically. So our tax rate decreased drastically. We all remember what happened in 2008. The bubble burst and the housing market crashed. And so as the home values went back down, we see our tax rate increase again. Now, that continues until 2017. We see this sharp spike here. Now, that's because in 2017, Centerville City went through this truth and taxation process and increased our tax rate. So that's the only reason why you see this steep curve here. And then you can see since 2017, home values have increased, so our tax rate has decreased until now. And you can see our proposed tax rate increase right here. All right, so here, this is just for your information, just a comparison of all the Davis County cities. You can see that Centerville is in the bottom half of our tax rate compared to other cities. A couple things to note here is that this is the 2020 property tax rates. That's because 2021 hasn't been set. And the reason, if you look on the left side next to the city, any city with an asterisk is going through truth and taxation this year. So we don't know what the other cities are deciding yet. But even if they all passed or didn't pass, Centerville would still remain in the bottom half. All right, so a question that is often asked is, are property taxes affected by inflation? And the answer is no. To adjust the property taxes, the city must initiate a public hearing called the Truth and Taxation. So again, the city doesn't receive more property tax revenue based on inflation. However, right here we have the inflation rates over the past 10 years. And so while the city did not receive more property tax revenue, the cost of providing the services to the citizens has increased. So often you might say, well, I know I've paid more in property taxes, so if the city hasn't raised my taxes since 2017, why have my taxes gone up? So there's two possible reasons for this. One is that another taxing entity, like we saw in that first pie graph, so like the school district or the county or one of the special districts, has gone through the truth and taxation process and raised their rates. So that's one reason you might see your bill increase. The second reason, and this is where, as a government accountant, I get a little nerdy and excited because it's kind of fun. But it's difficult to understand, so I'll do my best. But the second reason is your property has increased in value more than other properties in the city. Sorry, I butchered that. So your property has increased in value more than other properties in the city. So when the property value of the city increases, the tax rate decreases, which gives the city the same amount of revenue from year to year. However, if your property increases in value at a higher rate than the tax rate decreased, you'll see a tax increase, like a dollar amount increase on your property tax bill. But it's important to note that the city doesn't see that increase, because it just means if your bill went up a little bit, that means your neighbor's bill went down a little bit. So the end result is that the city sees the same amount of revenue. And so I know that's confusing, so I wanted to show you how it works. So here we have, in year one, we have a home. House number one has a taxable value of $100,000. There's the city's tax rate, and they pay $119 a year. House number two has a taxable value of $150,000. And so you multiply that by their tax rate, and they end up paying $179 a year. And you note that the city receives the $299. Now in year 2, the home values will increase. House number 1 saw their value increase 50%. So now their taxable value is $150,000. Now remember, when home values increase, the tax rate decreases. And so you multiply house number 1's taxable value by the rate, and you see their property tax bill went down. They're only paying $99 this year. Now house number 2, their home value doubled. So you take their home value, which is $300,000, multiply it by the tax rate, and now they pay $199. So you can see that house number 2's home value increased at a faster rate than the city as a whole. So they end up paying more, but house number 1 pays a little bit less, and the city still recognizes $299 in revenue. All right, so the next biggest question that we need to answer tonight is, why does Centerville City need a tax increase? So the city has not realized a property tax increase since 2017. And before that, it was in 1992, like I previously mentioned. So in 2017, the city would have needed to increase the property tax rate by 75% just to keep up with inflation. However, that's a large increase, and so City Council elected to increase it 40%. Now, many of the city's long-term needs have been put off due to lack of funding. In this year's budget, fiscal year 22 budget, we have a new fund called the Capital Improvement Fund. This is where we finance, this is where we budget for all of our large capital improvements. That includes roads and your fleet, your vehicles, your parks. Any of those capital improvements come out of there. And what it does is it kind of acts as a savings account, if you will. It allows us to save up. Another issue we have, as I mentioned, is our aging fleet. Some of our vehicles are over 20 years old. And while we've been forced to gain some advantages in the technology area, there's still a lot of improvements that could happen that we just need funding for. So the one thing I've noticed since I've been here at Centerville is that it seems like we have a pay-as-you-go intent. We don't have a lot of debt on our books. And I've been told that the city tries to avoid debt, which is a good practice. But in order to avoid debt, we have to be able to save up. So we would like to we'd like to be a pay-as-you-go city. But in order to do that, we need a little bit of a savings account. And that's where that Capital Improvement Fund plays a huge role. Right now, we don't have any money in there. Back in June, council voted that we can pass over anything above 20% of our reserves from last fiscal year. But since we're still closing out the year, we're not exactly sure what that number will look like. Another reason we need a tax increase is that rising inflation has made it difficult to maintain current service levels. And when I say service levels, that's the service that we provide to our citizens. So that's like the park maintenance or the smooth roads. With rising inflation, it's just getting more expensive to keep those roads smooth or keep those parks looking nice. Another issue we're facing is that wages are rapidly increasing across the Wasatch Front. If you just drive down Parish Lane to any one of those fast food restaurants, you can see that, a job that was once being paid minimum wage, they're now offering $13 to $16 an hour, and it seems like they still can't fill their positions. And so if we'd like to hire well-qualified employees, we're going to have to address wages. All right, so here is a chart showing the city's revenues to expenses. The revenue is the blue line, and our expenses over the past years are the orange line. You can see that we are always cutting it very close, and often years we happen to spend a little bit more than we brought in. You'll see that huge spike in 2010 and 2011. That was due to the theater being built. So that's why we saw that big increase in expenses. You can see that it's very close up until 2017. That's when we had our last tax increase, and that gave us a little bit of a buffer. So you see that we're back in the black and that our expenses are less than our revenue. But then if you look in the year 2020, you can see that inflation caught up once again and that our expenses have increased above our revenues. So we're often asked how the city gets its money. So this shows all of the general fund revenue sources. You can see that Centerville is very sales tax dependent, and out of every dollar we receive, 46 cents of it comes from sales tax. So that's nearly half of our general fund revenue is sales tax dependent. You can see in the bottom right corner that about 15% comes from property tax. So I like this analogy of a three-legged stool. So on one leg is sales tax, the other leg is property tax, and then the third leg is all the other sources of revenue. In an ideal world, we would have that, all three legs the same height, so that we're stable and not wobble. The benefit that Centerville has is that we do have some big box stores here in Centerville that produce a high amount of sales tax revenue, and that's able to keep property taxes low. The downside to that is that sales tax is purely based on economics. So in an economic downturn, we'll see that sales tax revenue drop, and the property tax is the only thing that we can see, or the only thing that will maintain in an economic downturn. So really, and also the property tax is the only thing that we can control here as a city. So it's important to maintain a strong property tax to maintain healthy revenues. Okay, so we saw the revenues. Now where does all the money go? And you can see that 33% of the general fund expenses go to the police department. And this makes sense because the police make up about a third of our full-time employees. Now if you add fire to that, that's nearly half of our expenses go to public safety. Between our parks and our public works, which out of the general fund is essentially our roads, you see that makes up about a quarter of our expenses. So between our emergency services and our parks and our roads, all the things that we enjoy the most, that makes up about 70% of our expenses. The rest goes to the necessities, the admin costs, and that's your administration department, your finance department, the attorney and recording services. All right, so now the question that everyone wants to know is, how will this tax increase affect me? So like I mentioned earlier, the average home in Centerville has a fair market value of $114,000. If that home or if that property is your primary residence, then your taxable value is $227,700. So the average home currently pays $238 in property taxes, in Centerville City property taxes. Now with the proposed increase of 14.59%, the average home would then pay $272, which would be an increase of $34.61 a year, or $2.88 a month. All right, so back in June, when the council decided to pursue the tax increase, it caused some adjustments to our budget, and so this is how we allocated it back in June. You can see that our property taxes revenue went up by $210,000, well, just shy of $213,000. At about the same time, we saw our South Davis Fire District assessment. This is the portion that the city has to pay to the fire district. It increased, and so we allocated just shy of $52,000 to the fire district. At about the same time, we got word that the police needed their new software system, the Motorola Flex, that replaces the Fat Pot system, and that will cost us $130,000 next year as we implement that. And so $130,000 went to that. And then the rest we allocated towards the part-time wages. And like I mentioned with the fast food restaurants, we felt the same thing in the parks wages. They recently had to increase their pay by a couple dollars an hour in order to get staffing to maintain our parks. So that is where our tax increase is going. So that is everything that I had for you. But before I turn it back over, is there anything Brand or staff would like to add to that? Anything I missed?
That was well done. Thank you, Nate.
Nate, I would like to say what amazing presentation. I wished I'd had this the first year I was on the council. So it took me about 2 years to even get up to speed and understand this, and this is the best way. I mean, obviously I've gotten up to speed a few years ago, so I'm there, but this was an excellent presentation and an excellent explanation to people that don't really understand it.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
thank you.
It can
Good
be very
job.
confusing, so thank you.
You broke it down
Good
for us.
visuals. Yep.
Nate, I think you did a great job. When I talked to you earlier today, you said that it might be long, but it wasn't long. It was very well done.
Just right.
Okay.
Property tax 101, we maybe went into the 200 or 300 level a bit, which was good, so thanks so much.
Yep.
Any other questions for Nate? Thanks, Nate. Before we open the public hearing, Chief, did you want to talk about that Motorola Flex?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Just take a few minutes. So we are currently using a system called FatPot. FatPot is a system that handles all of our records management. So that's all of our report system, citations, budget, property. There's a lot of different facets to it. It's a very important system that we have. It's a system that we've had for about 16, 17 years. Our provider has sold twice out to different providers, so we're on the third company that owns the system. We're one of just a small handful of agencies that still use that system. It's worked well for us in the past, but it's not being supported, and basically it's going away. So the writing is on the wall that this is not going to be something that we can do. At the same time, Motorola Flex, Motorola came in and purchased what was formerly called Spillman, which was another system that has been used and is currently being used widely in the state of Utah by law enforcement agencies and dispatch centers. All of the agencies in Davis County and many of them in the state are, if they're not already on Motorola Flex, they're going to Motorola Flex. So that's that is the overriding reason why we chose Motorola Flex. It's actually a great time for us to get into it because they're giving us a significant discount because it works to their advantage as well, Motorola's, to have all of us on the same system. So we're going to be in the county, had we not gone to Motorola Flex, we would be the one standout in the entire county using an outdated system that's not being supported. And then if we went and tried to find another system out there, it would be more expensive and we would be an outlier. We wouldn't have the interoperability with other agencies. So for example, when we go to the jail and we pick up someone, we arrest them, the officer in their MDT on their mobile data terminal in their car types in the information, it's automatically already shared with the jail. So when they arrive at the jail, the information's already populated in their system. We don't have to repopulate it again into their system. And we're able to share information with all the other agencies. And our bad guys are West Valley's bad guys and Clearfield's bad guys. We all deal with the same people over and over and over again. So it helps for us to interoperate in that regard too. So it just makes perfect sense for us. It was the perfect storm that came along here with Fat Pot no longer being supported, and then this opportunity coming along with Flex. It's something that just makes complete sense.
Chief, are you aware of the news with Dallas Police losing 8 terabytes of data and the impact that's having for their department?
Yeah, I know of some agencies that have had those kind of attacks, so that is a big concern, security. I know that you've had an opportunity to look at a little bit. So we do plan on having a resilient system that's redundant so that there's a location in county and a location out of county, a hardened location, both places where the data will be stored. I think all of us recognize the importance of cyber security, and it's a real issue. I know Clearfield City was just attacked, and with a ransom attack, trying to get $5 million out of them. It was pretty disruptive to their entire operation up there, but it's something that we're on edge about and concerned about, but we feel pretty confident in the system.
Yeah, for me, it was more pointing out that Fat Pot puts you at risk of losing things, and we don't want our cases being put into a limbo by losing that data. So I think it's a great approach.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very true.
I have a question, Chief. Haven't we already approved this? Didn't we already approve
Yes.
it?
Yeah, it's already been approved in the budget.
So it's already in this budget?
It's already in the budget, yeah, and it was already presented to you in my budget presentation and approved.
It's
We've already
approved.
signed the contract on it.
Play game.
It's approved in the budget with the property tax increase approval. So it's in the budget.
But it was in the budget
If the-
before we even talked about a property tax.
So-
It was.
Yes, it's something that needs to be done. And if it's removed, the property tax is not approved, then we will need to go through the budget to remove $130,000 worth of items or bring general fund balance in to pay for the
Or
system,
we could pay for it with American Rescue Funds.
potentially. There's a complication there that we would have to work through as well.
Well, and I would, to your point, Robin, point out that I understand the purpose for listing exactly the breakdown of what this year 212,000 goes to, but there are so many other needs. There are so many other equipment needs in all of the departments that we've put off year after year after year. And so whether it's the $130,000 for Motorola Flex this year or the Public Works equipment needs, there's just such a long list. So it just happens to be that these things were shown as, what equals 212,000, but even if we weren't getting Motorola Flex, there's something that would just slide right back in its place.
Did you have any more questions about Motorola or that system?
Thanks, Chief. All right, what we're going to do now at this point in time, unless council has any comments, we want to hear from the public. This is going to be a public hearing on the truth in taxation tax increase. And so we will hear from those that are in person at the meeting, and if there's any online, I'm going to make sure that online, if there's anybody joining that was not able to come, that we give it enough time for them to figure out the system to get in. It's on your screen. If you're going to come in online, there's a dial number and a meeting ID number and a passcode. Press #9 to raise your hand. I will have our city recorder brief me on whether we have people online. So we will now open that public hearing. Yes.
Can I just say, for my conscience, that the way it's presented is lovely, but in all honesty, I voted no. So when it says the council decided to go this way, that's because 3-2 always means the 3 wins, not that all of the council voted that way. So the other side of the story has not been presented, and I don't know what format would be an appropriate way to present that, but I think it's good for the citizens to be able to hear both sides.
That's why before I went to the public hearing,
Yeah.
I'd look to council, see if there was further comments on maybe what has taken place in the past, which is out there for public record, but many people may not have seen it and gone through it. So was there more, Councilwoman Ivy?
I don't have a formal presentation. Nate does a great job. Maybe I should have asked him to do two presentations, but I understand the process of the property tax, and I understand the limited dollars that the city gets. But I also understand that this has been an unusual couple of years, and we've received money from the federal government that was not part of our budget, and substantial money. And that substantial money has allowed us to catch up in places where we've been behind, in technology and in other things. It hasn't gone into all of the little envelopes that we would like it to go to if we had our wishes, but it's allowed us to fill in some gaps that we didn't think we could do with our property tax and sales tax that we do receive. So that has freed up money for us to do other things. We've been able to catch up and to feel more comfortable in a lot of areas that we didn't think our property tax could do. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be there forever to pay for those same expenses, but it has brought us up to a place where we're not desperate. And the reason I think I can say that is that when the staff brought us the budget in the first place, it was a balanced budget and it did not include a property tax increase. So, yes, government can always spend more of your money. Trust me, we can always find some way to spend more money if you want to give us more money. But I don't think now is the time that we're desperate for it. Will we need more money later on? Yep, we will. But we're not desperate right now. If you want to give us your money right now, that's great. We'd love to spend it, but it's not a desperate situation.
So I guess I'll speak up because I was the other one on the other side that voted against this. For the reasons that Councilman Ivy just stated, we as a city right now are in better financial shape than we've probably ever been in. We have a general fund that's only allowed to have so much money, such a percentage in it. We have exceeded that, so that's why we're going to have a capital improvement fund, is we've got to move money out of the general fund because we've actually got too much money in it. We talked about needing money for technology, which has been something since I've been on the council, which was a real concern for us, even back when we did the last tax increase, because people had computers that were so old that they could not be supported, their software didn't work, and with our money from COVID, every employee got a new computer. So I don't think, yes, well, our technology, and unfortunately they don't last forever, and they, get old fairly fast, and so we may need some in a few years. And I agree with Councilman Ivy on that I don't know that we'll never need one. It's just if we raise it now and things change, I don't think there's going to be any refunds or they're going to ever lower our taxes. There's lots of ways that we receive our revenue, and so I can agree. In fact, I almost changed my mind one night when they were talking about inflation and how we needed to stay up with inflation. I would prefer to see our sales tax, which is our bigger end of our revenue, go up. So we're talking about, Nate, how much did you say this property tax would bring in? It was about...
Just shy of $213,000.
And so we had a presentation just a couple weeks ago. We're so grateful. We've got Young Motorsports coming in on the other side of the freeway. Their prediction is over $80 million in sales a year. If that's the case, they'll be bringing in 200,000 or 300,000 more. So maybe in 2 years when we think we're going to need it, maybe our sales tax will have compensated and we won't need to. I have a problem with property tax because I think it affects the retired, the elderly, and the poor, because they finally get their home, and then sometimes we price them out of their home with their property tax. But if sales tax, I have a choice when I go to the store to buy steak or whether to buy hamburger. And when my earning power was bigger, I had more people at home and I spent more money at the grocery store. As you retire, your earning power goes down because you don't really have any earning power, you're on retirement. And so, I would rather see us try to do better economic development in the city. And if we can't, then we've got to raise sales tax. People in Centerville don't want their amenities to go down, their quality of life. And I know that. And I was willing, when we voted for it before, to do 40% because we needed it. There are a lot of people. I received a text today from somebody who replaces windshields, and he was replacing them for a rental fleet. I can't remember the number, but like $700 a month or something. And it went to 3 because of COVID and they weren't renting any cars. So right now, financially, he's barely making it. Will $30 making or breaking? Probably not. But a few $100s might, which is where all of the taxes are heading. I just think it's the wrong year. I think some of us were affected by COVID a lot more than others. And so we think, oh, we're still okay. But there were some people that were extremely affected by it. And I just feel like the federal government is trying to give us money to make things better and make things come up. And then we're like, oh, good, you gave them some money. Well, we're going to take it. I have a problem with that. I do not think this is the year that we have it. We were given a balanced budget without an ask for a property tax increase. I appreciate our staff from doing that. When you look at the Motorola Flex, it was already approved and it was already in our budget. Now we have $1.9 million in American Rescue Fund that can be used for our police department. I love my police department. I love our employees for Centerville. And I don't want this to affect them, but I think right now we have enough money to do the things we need to do to keep our employees and to pay them well. But I think right now the city is in a situation that, when you're the very best you've ever been, I'm not sure that we're right to be asking the citizens for more when maybe they're in the worst position they've been in.
Thank you.
No,
Go ahead, Councilman.
normally, we would have this discussion after the public hearing rather than before.
Well, I kind of thought that. I was waiting, but then,
Yes, that's what I'm waiting for.
And I recognize the two comments that have been made, but feel strongly the other way. And I guess I just wanted that out on the table at this point. There's a lot of information and a lot of reason why I am one of the 3 councilmen that voted in support of the property tax increase and believe that it was necessary. So why don't we go on to the public hearing, and then I will provide detail later.
Let's get to the public hearing. I think we'll have comments after that as well, too, as we get further insight from the public. So the public hearing is now open for the truth in taxation tax increase. Like I said, those that are here, come to the pulpit, identify yourself, name and where you're from, and those that may call in, please do the same.
And Mayor, we have received a comment to the city council over email as well, since the meeting began, about this.
Okay.
I have a question also, Jennifer. In the YouTube, was Nate's presentation showing? Okay, great, thank you.
While we're waiting, yeah, come on forward.
Hi, my name is Patricia Marsh, and I live at 874 East, 725 South in Centerville. And I appreciate hearing the pros and cons because I feel like as a citizen, that's fair to us to hear what the choices are that perhaps you're voting on. We are sort of straddling the working world, retirement world, and noticing the drop in our income with retirement. And I don't feel like this is a correct time to do this. If you have the funds to pay for what you have in your budget, You need to just cover your budget. That's been approved. I would vote against this increase in property tax at this time, because food prices have gone up, gas prices have gone up, people are demanding more money for their wages, but our income isn't going up for many of us to match that. So I'm against that. I'd like to ask the city council, on my city bill, I have a bill for recycling, and I'm unable to cancel that. Is that because you have a contract with the company, and because you've signed up, you no longer can cancel that recycling? Because that's an additional cost to my bill every month, and I don't feel like I want to participate in that program. So I'd like to find out if and how I could cancel that service. And second of all, I'd like to ask the council for a reconsideration of your snowplow policy of only plowing streets and not cul-de-sacs. And I know it has to be more than 4 inches of snow, and then you'll come up and plow our circle. But I think that because I'm paying property taxes at the same rate everybody else, I should have the same service. So I'd ask you to review that policy the city has to give me the equal service that everyone else gets with their tax dollars. Okay.
Thanks. We are making notes, and we will respond to
Okay.
these notes as people make them in relation to the truth in taxation. So
Okay,
I'd ask Nate to do that, and we're all making notes as well, too. So
thank you.
thanks, Patricia. We seeing anything online? I had received this in the last hour, 3 texts. Clark, Don and Vicki Johnson, we were not able to get to the city council meeting due to conflicting activities, but to let you know, we are not in favor of the large tax increase being proposed. Do not forget us as retired citizens of the great community. Now, this is obviously before people saw the presentation. Dear City Council and Mayor Wilkerson, we have a conflict of our schedule tonight and might not be able to make the Truth and Taxation meeting tonight at City Hall. I am writing this so that it can be read publicly or just among the council. We strongly oppose a large tax increase. While we understand the reasons behind it, it is too large and creates a burden on too many people. We vote that a smaller, more fair and reasonable annual tax be imposed instead of hitting us all at once with a large increase. We propose a 1 to 2.5% increase annually. Again, we strongly oppose the large increase that you are voting on tonight. Thank you so much. Brad and Lorraine Patterson from Centerville. We are concerned about a potential tax increase at this time. Families and businesses have been strained. We need to be frugal and consider wisely the need and impact of a tax increase at this time. From Paul and Judy Mendenhall. Those are all unsolicited. They just came through on my text. I would feel remiss if I didn't read them.
Did we want to read the email we got as well?
Sure.
I'd like Lisa's opinion on that.
Well, we've already entered some text messages into the record, but typically we would like to encourage people to come to the hearing and speak at the hearing.
Or at least call in and speak for themselves.
We can make comments and emails available for the public or review for the council. That's generally what we do, is we can make comments that are made prior to the meeting and make them available for your review during the meeting, but generally it's not read in the meeting or text messages shared in the meeting. We have made it easy, I think easier this year, by allowing the Zoom and people to call in so they don't actually have to be here, and I think that was an added service to make it available that if people aren't actually in Centerville, they could participate via YouTube or Zoom in this case.
I would say we've set precedent, so we should finish if we only have one more.
Yeah, I
tonight.
don't have a problem with it, other than I want to make sure we have a standard operating procedure and or policy in place and make sure we're following it. And, you know, Robert's Rules of Orders and all that sort of things.
Agreed, yes. As I've said, they're encouraged to appear or to provide information at least 2 hours prior to the meeting, and we can put it on Novus. That's typically what we've done if we receive anything, and then we close the public comment period either 5 p.m. the day before or 5 p.m. the day of. But I agree with Councilmember Meekum. If we only have one more, let's be fair and
Agreed.
perhaps summarize that one as well.
If it's a long email, maybe, you know.
Well, no, it's,
Okay.
it's not terribly long.
All right, but we
This
don't want
is-
to take it out of context either.
Plus it, yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. Plus it,
Go ahead and read it. They're just saying they don't want you to paraphrase it. It's not that long.
okay. Mayor and City Council, I think you all got this. Sorry I'm not at tonight's meeting. I don't want to be there. I shouldn't have to. I voted for most of you, and you promised to look out for my best interest. Last year, my earning power was decreased by $20,000. I had to figure out how to live within the money I had earned. The city should too. Between the school district, fire department, South Davis Sewer, and Centerville City, my property tax is going up, if approved, by $600 in a year. Perhaps we should start saying no to projects we can't financially support without increasing taxes. Because the value of my home has increased, so has my earning power. We as citizens and tax entities need to figure out how to better utilize hard-earned tax dollars without raising taxes. Thanks for all you do.
And the name?
From
Name.
Jeff Thomas.
Okay, we have somebody online, it looks like. Jennifer? Will you please state your name and where you're from?
My name's Heather Mackenzie Campbell, and I live at 579 East Pages Lane, Centerville, Utah. And I'm calling to also support the other people that have spoken up regarding the tax increase and the impact on a retiree's income. I support the idea of looking at either the small 1 to 2% increase a year or an increase in sales tax. When you have, and you're living on a limited income, and you have gas prices, food prices, everything's going up, even though you plan for being able to make it through retirement. I'm looking at our property tax bill overall, and I realize that living in our home almost 30 years, that it has more than doubled, but you would expect that it would increase, but a few years ago it increased quite a bit, and it went up about $200, it seems like last year, and now again. And my parents lived in California, and I'm thinking, that when is somebody going to do like a Prop 13 here so that people that are in their homes for many years don't lose their home during retirement? So I would just wanted to share that with you. I support all the work that you do to look at this. I support the police department getting the software from moving from FatPot to the Motorola Flex. I know that that's an important tool based on the career I had before I retired. But I was pretty shocked that going through these almost 2 years or a year and a half with COVID and everything that's been going on, that we would have a tax increase this year. And so I support, I don't know if you can reconsider, but I do think it should be reconsidered at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Anybody else
Bye-bye.
online, Jennifer? Anybody else from the audience? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Public hearing for the truth and taxation tax increase and is now closed. All right, let's go back to staff response. Nate, did you take, and then council will respond as well too, but I'm just trying to run this regular public hearing. Related to the truth and taxation, was there any responses that you had? We'll respond as well.
Yeah, so the couple concerns about receiving the money from the federal government, I just wanted to note that while we did receive some money from the federal government, it is very restrictive on what we could have spent it on. For the CARES money that we received, that was strictly in response to COVID-19. Now, we did use that towards, well, one, PPE, the protective equipment to keep our staff and police officers safe. We use some of it to remodel to make our staff be able to work in office at a safe distance from one another. And when we did use some to advance our technology so that we could work remotely if needed. Another question that was brought up a couple times was essentially, if the city is the healthiest it's been in a while, then why do we need more? I will say that the city is in good shape. I don't think we're as good as where we need to be. It has been expressed to me that the city tries to avoid debt, as you can see on our financial statements. We have a little debt, which means we want to try to pay as we go. Now, in order to do that, we need to be able to save for future expenses. One example is our Island View Park. We didn't save for that and ended up needing to use a lease to be able to build Island View Park. We know that, one of my goals here, talking with Brant, is we want to sit with each department head and schedule out when they will need their new pieces of equipment so that we can start saving and planning for those so that we don't have to finance our big projects going forward. So while if we didn't have the tax increase, we would not go bankrupt, I also think there's still plenty of room to grow in a financial health standpoint. And those were the two main questions that I had written down. Did I miss any questions?
Can you address, this has been brought up several times, the local sales tax rate. How does that get adjusted and how is that portioned out to the city? Because I think there's some misunderstanding on how that works.
Yeah, so we don't have control over the sales tax rate. There is a state and a county rate, but we do not have a city sales tax. So sales tax, like I mentioned earlier, is completely susceptible to the economy. Obviously people are going to need to buy food in an economic downturn, but commodity items like new vehicles or remodeling their homes or other things, some of those high dollar big box stores that we have may not see such a great output of sales tax in an economic downturn. So we can't control sales tax. That's out of our control. That's completely based on consumer spending. The only thing we can control is property tax.
But it is also fair to say that we've had a pretty big boom in consumer spending in the city over the last 2 years.
Yeah, our sales tax numbers have been healthy.
So the way the sales tax rate is used in the state as well is it's called a 50-50 formula. And 50% of it goes to point of sale and 50% of it goes towards a pool that is then divided out based on population. So as an example, Fruit Heights may not have a sales tax generator. They do receive sales tax from this pool based on their population. And I'll just give you a heads up and give you, this is being challenged at the state level on how that is being distributed, which could actually ultimately upend how cities currently receive their sales tax.
Could be less.
Could be less. We're trying to argue with the state that to hold cities harmless, but it's really difficult to hold cities harmless if there's not a bigger pie. So just keep in mind that sales tax is what it is today, and we've built our cities based on this sales tax model, but the state is considering upending the entire thing, and we do not know where those cards will fall. That's why property tax is very critical to a city to provide services. It's very, it's more stable than any other of the income sources.
So when they're looking, are they looking at the whole sales tax or the 50% that go to the pool?
Looking at all of it, but they've also given a lot of exemptions to manufacturers already that have cut quite a bit into other cities. So the state really has usurped our local authority in some of these areas, but they're really focusing on the 50-50, and Roger, too, has done an incredible job of fighting back against that, as well as the league, but just keep in mind that's going to be another fight this year.
And so that's something that I definitely wanted to bring up, is our vulnerability in the sales tax. Not only is it not that we should not plan on it going up, but that we should be very prepared for this rug being yanked out from under us and our feet flying into the air because of the sales tax issue constantly being brought up, and because we have big players in our city, and you never know when those big players are going to go out of business. And that is a huge risk of that rug being yanked out. It would be such a drastic effect on something that we're so deeply dependent on. That Nate's analogy of the three-legged stool is so important to understand as far as healthy fiscal policy for a city.
So Tammy, I will agree with that, but all we have to go on is our last year when we were over 300,000 more than we had anticipated. So if in a year, I don't think the state's going to change it without any notice. So if the state changes it and we can see that we need to up our property tax, I'm all for that. I can't do it when I feel like our sales tax was 300,000 more than we even anticipated last year. Maybe they'll change it and we'll get more sales tax. So to me, I'm more willing to address things as they happen rather than.
But wouldn't you agree that last year was not normal? That people were not traveling, they weren't eating out, they were spending their money differently. And so I think working off of last year versus the trend over time, that's an anomaly. It's the same issue I have with like ARP money or CARES money. Those are, and you hear it at the national level, those are once in a generation spends. They're printing money that isn't really there to provide to the cities, and that comes out somewhere. And where we were able to offset some of the police salaries through CARES funding, that just shifted the pockets again. Now we have the same problem of, I liken it to a sugar crash. If we accept the appetite of what CARES funding or ARP funding does, and we build that into our budgets as something that is sustained for a couple of years, you have the problem of returning back to your normal spending levels when you get beyond that. So I almost look at the ARP as, that's great found money, but I don't want to look at that in our overall spend patterns over time, because if we look at current needs that we have and needs for the future in terms of staffing, we've talked about additional police personnel. We know that there's a startup cost for that, and we need to be prepared to pay that. So the question is do we do some of that from ARP? Probably not, because there's some restrictions on what you can do with that. And I wish the Treasury would stop monkeying with the definitions of how you can spend it, because it seems to be kind of a whack-a-mole for those of us trying to track what that looks like. I think they're stable now, but it's not going to meet all the needs that we have in the city. It'll definitely plug some holes. I don't want anyone to think that we aren't going to use that money and use it well, but it doesn't solve the long-term horizon of what do we do for these ongoing costs, and how do we secure the revenue that allows us to properly project for how do we staff for someone. And I think that's important, that we're careful with making our projections very conservative, and that we're using stable sources of revenue, not variable sources. That's my primary issue.
But I speak for the trees over here. When we're talking about, the city might have a substantial impact from an economic downturn, the citizens will have it first. The citizens whose property taxes have been increased will see it before the city will feel the pain. They will see it at the grocery store. They will see it at the gas station. Someone needs to speak up and realize that, maybe, and I'm gonna make myself very unpopular. Maybe we're going to have an economic downturn. Very likely, given the way things are going right now. If that happens, it's not going to be feasible for us to be able to keep up with whatever we've been doing before. And just because the Joneses or the Bountiful City or anybody else is doing it doesn't mean that we'll be able to afford it. Maybe we're going to have to accept more potholes. Maybe we're going to have to let the lawn grow longer at the cemetery. We may have to tighten our belts, but I would rather have us have the opportunity to do that and have our citizens have a little more money in their pockets that they can try to roll through the economic crisis as well, than us say, oh, it's all right, we've already pre-taxed our citizens to the level that we think we need so we can maintain our pretty city, and they will have to move because they can't afford it. I think we owe it to our citizens to say, we don't need it right now. We may need it in 2 years. We may need it next year, but we don't need it now, and we're not going to take it before we need it. That's how I feel about it.
In 27, are you there? In
Yep.
2017, we did a 40% increase. And every one of the 5 of us were involved in that council, and the commitment was made, we will not do that to people again. That was the result of 20 years of not keeping up with inflation. We started talking about a tax increase in 2019 and I don't mean to throw stones, but I guess I'm going to, by the same 2 people on the council got talked out of doing it in 2019 because it's too close to 2017. And we talked about it last year, and we were talked out of it again, and we promised ourselves we would do it this year.
We promised we would talk
14
about it.
No, well, that's not what I remember the promise being. The 14.5% increase doesn't even get us back to where we were in 2017.
Sure.
We have tremendous pressure on our law enforcement salaries. We have tremendous pressure on our fire department salaries. Yes, inflation is hitting every place, and the statistics that were put up, I'm not sure where they came from, but I suspect they are Bureau of Labor statistics, and I'm sorry they don't measure the inflation that we have experienced. We are selling ourselves down the river not to keep up to date, and I feel very strongly that we need to keep up to date so that we don't have another time where we've got a 40% increase. Now, if we have another substantial economic downturn like we had in 08, like we had in 02, there may be additional consequences. But we're in much better shape if we have stayed even with the inflation over time than if we have let it slip over time and then have the economic downturn on top of that. I feel strongly that it's the time to do. We've talked ourselves out of it the last 2 years. And the only thing, the extra monies that have come in that have helped the economic position are not available for everything that we need to do. There are limitations on how we can use them. The one other thing that I'd like to remind everyone of, we were flirting with having to be managed by the state in 2017 because our reserves were so low. We were approaching the 5% trigger. We were sitting at 5.8%, and we could have lost our autonomy had we not done something. And I feel very strongly that that is not what we want to do to our citizens and ourselves. So
But what
that's the reason.
percentage are we at now?
Nate, what's the fund reserve at?
Well, that's what he mentioned earlier, 20%. We don't know exactly where we are now, but we agreed 20%. So 25% is the state max. With that, we created the Fund 47 for capital improvement projects in the future. So we have the rainy day fund, so to say, the reserves built up for the oh no, just in case, which makes us feel confident and comfortable. Keep in mind, we used $1.1 million from the CARES Act funding to make that happen. So the CARES Act funding was primarily went towards helping us give us a healthier reserve to get us up to speed to pre-2017 levels.
So those reserve funds, are we limited on what we can do with them since we use CARES money?
As long as you keep it between 5 to 25%, you're okay according to the state. However, not okay financially and health-wise. If we have a catastrophe or emergency management issue, you need to be able to draw on $1 million because you won't have access to GO bond funding so quickly, right? So that having that reserve is just critical for emergency management and just You can tap into it occasionally. For example, with, if this fails tonight, the truth of taxation, we will be coming back to you as a council to pull $130,000 from that reserve to pay for the Motorola Flex, but also all the other items, particularly the ongoing items as the fire district, our assessment there, as well as the part-time wages. Those are ongoing, and those will be year to year. The one time, sure, we could take care of it with one-time money, but we'll want to replenish that $130,000 in the future.
So we're restricted on our ARPA funds, but not what we have in reserve right now.
Not anymore. So since we used the CARES Act funding to essentially supplant payroll for the police officers, so that was our ability to remove the strings, so that frees up the money and they're unrestricted in our reserves. So they are unrestricted, but that's that $1 million, 1.1 million, I believe, using the fire and police payroll to help.
And important to note that payroll will be an ongoing cost.
Correct.
Right. I'd like to say a couple things to this word that Councilman Ivey has used of desperate. We're not desperate yet. We don't need it yet. And when we did the property tax increase in 2017, it had been almost 30 years. And we were a few $1 million behind in a roads plan that kept our roads healthy. And I'd like to point out that if we wait till we're desperate, if we wait till our roads are crumbling and we have potholes, then that costs us more. That wastes the taxpayer money. So, for example, I'm going to be in need of a new roof in a few years, within the next few years. And that's going to cost me, $20,000 to $30,000. And I know that. And it would be fiscally irresponsible for me to say, well, I'll wait till I start getting a drip, right? Because then where am I going to come up with the money all of a sudden? And I will have a drip, which then will cause internal damage. And that's the same thing with our roads. So it really is the responsible thing for us to do to make sure we're looking into the future and having that capital improvements fund and having that savings balance for things that we know those big projects come and we have to have the savings for them. Heather called in and asked us to consider the 2 to 3% a year, and Bill's already spoken to this, but I've been asking for that my entire tenure on the council, and especially after the 2017 increase, I said we need to do this every year and just like we talk about pay raises, like we talk about what the inflation rates are and how each year with inflation we get a ding in the services that we're able to provide. But there's always a reason. Every year we can come up with reasons not to do this. No one likes a property tax increase, and we have come up with reasons not to do this. But here we are. So, from 2017 to 2021, 2 to 3% a year, that's the percentage that we're at now. And so we're just having to do it in the chunk because we chose to say no the other ways. Another one point that I want to bring up, and this is one that I don't think people recognize, is I know that the citizens of Centerville really appreciate the nature of our city and that they appreciate the single-family home nature of our city. But roads is one of our major expenses. And when you have one house per that amount of road, you're going to pay more for your roads maintenance, for your snow removal. So when we appreciate the fact that we have single-family homes, some larger lots, lots of cul-de-sacs, that exponentially increases the cost per resident for the care for our roads. And so that's something to recognize. And then in addition, on top of that, we have a mandate from the city to address the moderate income housing needs. And from the state, I'm sorry. We have a mandate from the state to address the moderate income housing needs. And if we don't do that adequately, the consequence is to lose massive amounts of state road funding. And this council has, made statements against that fulfilling of that mandate, such as this is hogwash. And so do we want to be...
I don't think that's ever been said. I'm sorry, I resent that remark.
You said, for the record, I want to say this is hogwash. But the point is that we need to be careful because we are also very reliant on state roads funds. So we need to do smart economic development, we need to do reasonable land use planning to make our city an affordable place to live, to not put at risk other sources of funding that we have. It's all a complicated compilation of many, many issues. But for now, what we tried to do with this property tax increase is a very simple, we added up the years of inflation. And this equals the inflation so that your services don't have to go downhill.
And to your point there, Tammy, and that's something that, and I understand fixed incomes, I understand retirement. We fully acknowledge that. We had people who came in on the last tax increase. We were all here in their 90s, not understanding why we would be doing this to them and personally. And the counterpoint that I feel that I need to make is that we have an expectation in the city that if you dial 911, the appropriate service turns up, and they're skilled and prepared to do that function. And if you look at some of the EMS services, specifically paramedics and ambulance services, disproportionate use is by retirees and those who are in need of immediate assistance. So I think that as a community, we have to accept that if we're going to take care of our neighbors and want those services to be high quality and responsive and staffed by good people who are content with the work, feel that they're appropriately compensated, we need to be prepared to pay for that as a community. And I hope that I never have to have the police or the fire department show up at my house, but I'd also like the knowledge of knowing that my city services are such that when I dial for that, they're coming. They're coming on good quality roads, and they're going to get there in an appropriate amount of time to help me out. And so it's really hard for me to say, yes, I understand that this is going to be more of a financial burden for you, but you're also likely to be one of the recipients of these services sooner than another citizen. So it's tough. I don't know how to really reconcile that. It's just the cost of being a society. We all participate in that.
I get a little skewed here because of the profession I'm in. Just recently, I had a client on PPP funds that was trying to get $800,000 eliminated by the SBA where they didn't have to pay it back. And we submitted information, and they allowed about 700,000 of it, because initially they came out with it would be for payroll and it would be for rent. And then their guidelines got bigger and bigger and bigger, and so we submitted more documentation. For other expenses that it was even hard to interpret that those would be acceptable, they accepted them, and the whole loan forgiveness was forgiven. And so to me, the tricky part of this, and I said this back in June, is where there's 1.9 ARPA funds, what will it be allowed to be spent on? Councilman McEwen said, we think we're stable on that. I think he's probably right. We probably are. But there may be more come out that it's allowed to be spent on, and as well too. We've learned since June that there's a couple other areas that we can spend it on. And if we're talking 1.9 and we're able to use 200,000 of it, we're raising on this over the next 3 years, then we've made up for inflation. But with that said, I do, and I apologize for bringing text messages in, but all those text messages and what Councilwoman Fillmore is saying is they were talking about large increase. Obviously, we're talking about large percentage increase. The dollar amount is not huge, but the percentage increase is used, and maybe there is some merit in truth in taxation every year because then we don't have the large percentage increase. But
Mr. Mayor, I will say our ARPA funds are over 2 million. Just to clarify, I believe almost 2.1. Is that right? And then also, I will say, I did have a conversation with the Fergus Group just this morning, and there are new rules that are being formed. There was a comment period ended July 16th, and there is new rules that will be released probably in the next couple of months. And that's why we're still kind of waiting on what to use those funds for, which we'll have a strategy session with this council in the near future on what to use those funds for. But I think from a staff perspective, one of our biggest needs, as well as the lack of resources or revenue, is our water projects. And I see us using the entire amount almost exclusively on water projects. Just keep that in mind, that in one-time projects.
I think you totally could. And that's the guidance that hasn't changed from the beginning, is infrastructure projects, and we know we've got things to do there.
And it's clear.
I don't see it going very far. I mean, you take a look at the costs of what it were for the water tank, even with the grants and matching, it's not going to go that far. And to what Tammy was saying earlier, if you all recall, our road program is a 100-year replacement. Our water system is a 50-year replacement, and that includes periods of what are called dead roads. And if you're a taxpayer in the city, you don't want to live on a dead road where your road is basically in a failed condition. But because of the way we spend currently in the funds that we have, we don't have any way to move that number into a 50-year. There's just no way. We don't spend enough money. So I don't see.
We don't spend enough money, we don't have enough money.
We don't have enough money to spend, so we can't move that beyond that 100 years. So at some point in that project, somebody's getting lower quality services, to what you were saying, Stephanie. There are places where we're going to have road failure. Sure, they'll be the next in line to get fixed, but that's really unfortunate if you're on one of those streets. I'm glad that we're on a 50-year replacement cycle with the water system, and we seem to be in pretty good shape, but every year it's whack-a-mole, right? And we have the public works crews out fixing leaks and dealing with major issues, and those aren't cheap. What was the last one, Brent? The last major leak we had? What was the cost?
It's going on right now, by the way. There is a major leak going on right now.
Oh, really?
On 400 East, Deer Hollow, including Deer Hollow, and those on 400 East from Parish Lane to London Road. For an extended period of time, they'll be out of water because it's a water main break.
Okay,
Thanks,
there
Chief,
you
for
go.
sharing that.
So you don't have to wait long for a leak to pop up in the system, and somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 gets spent to rip up the road and fix that problem. And I'd like to be in a position where we can get ahead of some of that and work with some of the funds to recalibrate. I would love to see, even if we could get the 100 road to go to 90 or 80, and the water system to go from 50 to 35. I mean, those would be great. I see Nate's trying to do the numbers in his head, and it's a lot. It's a big number to get there. So I'm concerned that as we move forward in time with the increase in costs that we are already seeing, and you're right, look at the gas pump. That is the canary in the coal mine for what everything else is going to cost you. And as these prices continue to go up, I see an erosion in city services, and I want to be avoiding that as much as possible.
And Councilmember Kuhn, just something that has been brought up in a previous meeting is currently we budget $1.4 million in transportation. Kevin, and at the time Randy stated we need approximately $2 to $2.5 million in that to keep up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we're underfunded even for that.
We're underfunded, yeah. There's one last thing I'd like to say, and that's to the point of our elderly retired citizens. I have so much respect for the mindset, the fiscally conservative mindset of our citizenry. We don't like to take on debt. We don't ever do it lightheartedly. Whenever we do, we make sure that it's the smartest thing to do and the smartest way to approach something. And when the reasoning behind that, the philosophy behind that is to not kick the can down the road to the future generations, right? If we're going to have something, we should pay for it ourselves. But what's happened is that the tax rates were so low for so long, for all those years that our older residents enjoyed living in Centerville, the tax rate, I would say, was too low. And so the can has been kicked down the road to this generation, to this day. And it's time for us to say, if we don't pick it up and start being responsible and paying for what we get, then we're just kicking it down kicking that can down the road to our children. And I don't feel comfortable with that.
I did have one other comment that I was going to make as we've been going through this process. I have not gone out and solicited conversations with people that I know and neighbors, But essentially, as I have talked to people and explained the basis for having a tax increase and the reason I felt there was a need for a tax increase, I have not had one of the people that I have talked to disagree with me and say, please don't do it. I guess I'd point out we have about 6,500 residents in town, and I don't know what the total number of count is, but it's about 10 that have said no. Now, I don't know how many each of the other people on the council have heard that from, but as heartless as it may seem, and I don't mean to be heartless about it, I believe that the vast number of our citizens recognize that we're trying to do the best that we can, and they are in agreement with the proposal. That's the reason we don't see a packed house. In 2017, if I remember right, there were about 35 people disagreeing with us, even in 2000. Here in this,
Fewer than that, I thought. I mean, in the room, there
Robin
in the
Robin
room,
had some numbers, yeah.
and we weren't
In the
doing
room?
anything online.
In the room, I remember about 14 people is what
I think it was
There
more.
was 19 people,
Yeah.
18 for, and one, what?
18
against and one for.
Yeah.
So, I just point that out. I think that the majority of our residents recognize that it's something that, if they're going to have the city that they've had, needs to continue to occur.
Yeah, I think that ultimately we're at a situation where, we're reading across the faces. I mean, everyone's going to vote their conscience on this and will be well respected for that. For me, ultimately, I am in favor of the increase for the reasons stated, and I also believe that this money will be used appropriately. If I thought that there was any frippery or fat in our budget, I wouldn't be there saying, let's look at a tax increase. What is laid out tonight were numbers that make sense to me, and I'm comfortable with the increase to catch up with the inflation. I am worried about future years. I really am. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know, all the economic indicators and the folks that are out there, you just flip channels and you get different impressions of whether the salad days continue or we're headed for a horrible crash. I can't look to that as the indicator. I can only look towards what is the steady growth that we're seeing in the costs of the city and how do we offset those. That's really what I have to boil it down to. The future we'll look at when we get there.
And I appreciate the robust, healthy discussion and all different viewpoints presented.
Is there more?
I think we're at motion time.
We had a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we approve the proposed property tax increase of 14.59% as has been laid out earlier in the evening.
Second.
Further discussion? We've had robust discussion, but last opportunity.
And just to clarify, adopting resolution 2021-34.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I didn't have the number in front of me. Thank you.
I was just about to say, thank you.
Okay, so if I don't hear further discussion, let's do a roll call vote on it. Councilwoman Meekum.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Nay.
That passes 3-2.
I'd like to make a comment right now that
Sure.
that's the best part of being on this council is we can all walk out that door. I truly believe that everybody voted their conscience tonight, and I respect everybody for the way they voted. There's no hard feelings. I was swayed one way and the other when listening to others of you talk, and it was a hard decision either way. And I did what I felt strongly about, but I admire everybody else for doing what they thought strongly about, and I appreciate working on a council where I feel like we're all still friends after we fight it out.
And she's only kicked me once, so we're fine.
Only one?
And those that made comments, especially the Marshes, a couple of things were outside of the truth and taxation, but we want to answer your questions on that as well too, so we'll get those answered. And if there's any other we didn't get answered, we'll do our best to get those answered.
Motion to adjourn?
No, we have to
Have to approve the budget.
Budget.
You need to approve the FY '22 budget.
But we don't have to go over it, do we? 'Cause
Oh, no, we can go over
lots of time.
it. Could you pull up the 76?
Nope, he's already used all his frequent flyer miles on that one.
So we're almost there, we're almost there.
Nate,
Thanks
get
for
with them.
coming.
Get their contact information.
I have it.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah, we'll give it to you.
And for the record, you didn't kick.
Thank you.
That's all right, I'll take credit for it.
You should.
So we need a
So-
motion on the budget.
I'll move that we adopt Resolution 2021-35, the FY 2022 budget.
Second.
Okay, we should do a roll call vote on it. Start at the end, Councilman Meekum. Councilman Meekum?
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Did we miss any motions? Okay, now we'll entertain the motion. to adjourn.
We'll interrupt real quick. We want to
Okay.
remind you that we have a canvassing meeting next week. So we have a meeting on Tuesday, 8/24. So Jennifer?
24 PM?
No.
Date.
Date of 8/24
4th at 6 o'clock.
at 6 o'clock.
Getting pretty
So-
precise now.
I am going to do that at a future meeting. That'd be awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.